The newly elected Andrew Connors is trying to present himself as trustworthy by using the official City of Titusville logo and his title as mayor. He claims he wants what's best for the residents while leveraging their trust to cover up his own lack of understanding about how things actually work.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of confusing information out there as to what's going on in our city government and what's going on in our lagoon.
Yeah, so there's a lot of confusing information, and I have a feeling it's about to get a lot more confusing.
That's why I wanted to take some time to explain the right to clean water. This is the Right to Clean Water ballot initiative that was put on the amendment 2 years ago.
Oh, you mean the charter amendment that was drafted by attorneys? You mean the charter amendment that the city, the government, had an opportunity to look over? The amendment that the city had a duty to ensure that it complied with the Constitution before it got onto the ballot? The right to clean water that will give people the legal standing to hold polluters accountable? That amendment?
And like many of you, I voted for it.
I'm glad that the new mayor supported the right to clean water in 2022, although it's concerning that he didn't understand what he was voting for, and now he holds a position in office.
Thinking it had something to do with drinking water.
Hey, Mr. Connors, did you learn about the water cycle in third grade? It explains how water evaporates from places like the Indian River Lagoon, ponds and lakes, then rises into the air and eventually falls back down as rain. The rain seeps into the groundwater and helps replenish your water table. Did you know that your city gets drinking water from well fields?
Thinking it had something to do with drinking water, something that I thought would improve our quality of life here in Titusville.
It is all about the quality of life. Did you know that in the late 90s, the water quality in Titusville began to decline? So the city had to commission a study in 1999 and ended up permitting a new well field in 2008. Shouldn't we take action to protect those well fields from harmful pollution? In case anybody's not keeping up, those well fields are where you get your drinking water.
Gives people the ability to sue our city, to sue businesses, because they perceive a violation that the water is polluted.
Everyone knows, or at least the people that have been through court know, you can't just file baseless and silly lawsuits.
Perceive.
No lawyer would consider this, and no court would take it seriously. These kinds of cases need real experts and real evidence. So what he is implying is that the polluters shouldn't face consequences.
Fortunately, these environmental activists.
He forgot to mention that these are lifelong residents of this community. These individuals are advocating for their rights to voice their concerns and support initiatives on the ballot. The council members and newly elected mayor who continue to push out misinformation to cause confusion in the community are actually infringing on constitutional rights. This seems like an attempt to intimidate those who have tried to fight for your right to have clean water. These citizens have witnessed their city government fail to protect their waterways, have dealt with decades of sewage spills, inadequate infrastructure funding, and a complete absence of transparency during crisis. They are ordinary citizens, and no derogatory labels can diminish their significance.
Fortunately, these environmental activists are taking this fight to make Titusville fiscally responsible for the entire lagoon.
That's just simply untrue. The city is responsible for the waterways in its city boundaries. It is not responsible for the entirety of the lagoon. That is false. And a good example of this is if the county does something to the waterways and it impacts the city of Titusville, what you are supposed to do as a city council member or the mayor of the city is to step up for your citizens and represent them like you were elected to do.
The Save Our Lagoon Fund at the county has $585 million worth of projects either scheduled or completed.
The newly elected mayor is throwing around large and irrelevant numbers concerning the Save Our Indian River Lagoon half-cent tax. That tax was created to restore the Indian River Lagoon. The right to clean water aims to tackle pollution at its source, ensuring that future generations will not have to burden the cost of cleanup like we are now with the half-cent tax.
Explain to you what injunctive relief means.
The newly elected mayor never explains what injunctive relief is in the next clip. Instead, you're going to hear this unbelievable scenario about how lawsuits are going to be launched against the city for allowing rainwater to enter the lagoon.
46 outflows of rainwater that flow into the lagoon. When it rains, the water needs to go somewhere. The activists would claim that the rainwater hurts the lagoon, and therefore we would have to dam up those outflows.
Where have I heard that before?
Sue the city and say no stormwater in the river.
What they're not mentioning, for reasons unknown, is that when courts review cases, all presented evidence will be considered, including to what extent the city is taking to best prevent harm to its waters. The right to clean water is actually the right to self-defense, a right to expect responsible governance on matters as critical as clean water.
This would enjoin violation of monetary damages to restore the waters to their pre-damaged state. And if we're talking about the lagoon, when was that? In 1492, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue?
Mr. Connors, you probably don't remember because you grew up in Ohio, likely surrounded by farmlands while we watched our clamming industry fade away. And while we watched the space program take off, new houses popping up on wetlands, and entire new cities like Vieira emerging in the swamps. I don't think you've ever experienced scooping up seahorses in your little delicate hands and knowing what the thick seagrass across the entire lagoon used to look like.
Nobody can define what pollution is in this, and therefore it is a blank check.
The amendment clearly defines pollution in the amendment itself, and it parallels to great degree the same definition found in Florida law.
It is not that anybody's against clean water, it's that we have a fiscal responsibility to our citizens.
Like when the city spent $1 million for a walkway, or over $165,000 to sue the citizens, or over $89,000 to hire a public relations person. Or what about the $70,000 the city had to put towards a settlement because a child got paralyzed from the bacteria from a major sewage spill? Oof, speaking of, what about all the fines that the city of Titusville has had to spend on sewage spills? Should we also mention some of the very high salaries, such as the city manager's salary of over $18,000 a month? And still those water rates and taxes continue to raise. I'd argue that the city hasn't been the most fiscally responsible.
As a city council member, my number one job is to be a good steward of your tax dollars.
Number one job is to represent the people, and that includes upholding their constitutional rights. And by not certifying the 2022 election and votes, you are not upholding their constitutional rights. Being a good steward to the tax money is a part of the job.
Any council member that says that this is a good idea, they don't know anything about your business, taxes, how the world works at all.
Mr. Connors, are you telling us that former Mayor Dan Diesel had no idea what he was doing? Or Vice Mayor Joe Robinson? Because both men ultimately chose to uphold the citizens' constitutional rights and to honor the votes.